Hi, my name is Zomali Guyon, and today we're going to be talking about understanding your child's developmental stages. So, this presentation is brought to you by Day One. Our services include community education, legal services, social services, and school programming. We are an organization that works to end teen dating violence and dating abuse, as well as domestic violence, through community education, supportive services, legal advocacy, and leadership development. We believe in leadership development to build communities. We partner with young people and survivors 24 and under to create a safe, healthy, and respectful partnership. So my name is Zomali Gruyon, or Zo. I have spent the last 6 years working with young people 24 and under primarily, providing psychosocial education and therapeutic support for survivors of sexual violence, middle schoolers, high schoolers, and college students, as well as the people who work with them. Before that, I had a background in working with survivors of sexual violence on college campuses. I have my master's in psychology, and I am currently pursuing a license in clinical art therapy. So that is a little bit on me. I will be presenting today, and I hope that you enjoy this presentation and that you learn a lot from it. So some community agreements, I have changed names for anonymity. I am encouraging y'all to keep a specific young person that you care about in mind, practice discussion points, and give yourself grace as we're all learning together. So today we're going to be talking about the benchmarks of kindergarten through eighth grade and the developmental periods that happen within those ages, as well as discussing how these benchmarks show up in student dating relationships. We will be practicing using our knowledge of developmental stages to support young people in difficult situations. So, starting with 5-year-olds. 5-year-olds emotionally are developed to need approval, right? So it is developmentally appropriate for a 5-year-old to be enthusiastic about the world and love it as long as they have structures that are sturdy. It's also appropriate for them to struggle to understand other people's points of view because that part of their brain has not been fully developed yet. Socially, it is developmentally appropriate for a 5-year-old to not really communicate about school at home, to adore their teachers, their parents, and any other significant adults in their lives, and to expect adults to create safe boundaries and help them make sense of the world. Keeping all of this in mind, I will be posing some scenarios so that we can talk about how it would be best to deal with them, be it through the lens of a caregiver or a teacher or educational um, or an educator. Sorry. Just a little bit more on 5-year-olds. Intellectually, they are focused on taking on everything at once. They take things very literally. They appear logical, but so on to 6-year-olds. 6-year-olds socially can be bossy or critical without thinking about implications. The desire to have friends suddenly becomes very important to them. They are easily upset. They are a poor sport, or they don't like to lose at things or not be first. They want to be first all the time. They like to challenge boundaries and authorities, and they love surprises. Cognitively, they are more able to see others' points of view, concerned with the quantity of work over the quality, as in they like to accumulate as much stuff as possible. And they are discovering how and why things happen in the past and present. So they're learning about causes and effects. Um, 7-year-olds socially may change friendships quickly, right? Nobody likes me becomes the sort of um, mantra of a 7-year-old because there's a lot of change happening socially and a lot of development that is quickly taking place both in their brains and their bodies. They benefit from the security of rules, routines, and physical boundaries. They have better listening skills than their previous years, and they rely on adults for help and reassurance. Perfectionism is also common. They are better at finishing what they have started. And review is key during this stage, which basically means that going over whatever was just discussed is important to solidify their understanding of it. 8-year-olds socially are somewhat awkward. They are gregarious, they are humorous, they tend to exaggerate, primarily have same sex friendships, and they struggle with limits and boundaries. Their friendship begins to broaden, they can be very talkative. Cognitively, they overestimate their own ability. Their basic skills begin to be mastered. They work in a speedy way. They tend to be in a hurry a lot, just excited to be done with stuff. And their attention span is somewhat limited. Um, they're also developing the ability to see from other people's point of view, which is also called decentralization. This allows them to be more able to engage in more emotionally complex interactions. So, for example, pretending to like a gift in order to spare someone's feelings is something that begins to happen when they're at 8 years old. 9-year-olds, on the other hand, socially tend to form cliques. They tend to be self critical and critical of others. They're pushing limits. They enjoy friends within the same interest group, and they are exploring power dynamics. Cognitively, they have a lot more anxiety about the world and their friends and their family, right? They're starting to understand how relationships work and crave that belonging that all humans want. They really value factual explanations, and their understanding of justice and fairness begins to emerge at this age. 10-year-olds, or the terrific tens, are usually quite truthful, right? Whereas in earlier stages of development, young people are learning what is truth, what is not. They're confusing fantasy with reality. 10-year-olds tend to be very grounded, tend to like to be truthful. They tend to be talkative, friendly, and generally happy. Their issues with fairness start to peak and begin to be solved. So, for example, 10-year-olds care a lot about what is fair, and they are more apt to finding solutions to lack of fairness in a situation. Generally, they look up to and admire their teachers and parents, and they actually really enjoy to be around them, which is really something that you as a caregiver or educator can use to your advantage. And they engage productively in collaborative project-based learning. They're highly relational and collaborative. They are also quick to anger, but also quick to forgive, as they are still learning how to regulate their own emotional states of being. Cognitively, their handwriting becomes sloppier, right? Some say that this is because their brain is starting to move faster than their hands move. They also like rules and logic. They're able to concentrate for longer periods of time. They're into memorizing things, and they're becoming proficient and passionate about things like music, sports, hobbies, or like a specific interest. They're also developing a more mature sense of right and wrong. 11-year-olds socially are easily embarrassed. They crave a lot of time to talk with their peers. Their cliques become very intense, and they have this emerging desire for popularity. They like to argue and challenge rules. They can be a little bit moody and self-absorbed. It is developmentally appropriate for them to be sort of stuck in their own point of view, because there's just like a lot happening developmentally and hormonally within their bodies and brains. And of course, their mind is just adapting to all of these changes. They are sensitive about their changing bodies, which makes perfect sense. Cognitively, they can think more abstractly than other ages before this. They start to challenge adult interpretations and make their own assumptions. They like adult tasks such as researching, interviewing, etc. And they like to challenge rules and test limits. 12-year-olds, socially, their peers are more important than adults, right? So now it begins to change. Whereas at 10 years old, young people were a little bit more interested in the relationships with the adults. They're more interested with their in the relationships with their peers at 12 years old. They will both question and argue with adults. They like group work and individual work. They also need rituals to mark turning points. They can be very self-aware and insightful at this age, as well as empathetic, right? So taking advantage of that empathy can be very useful, both in the schoolwork as well as in the social development and constructing and maintaining of relationships. They're also able and like excited to take on more responsibilities. Cognitively, they may begin to excel at a specific subject or skill. They have a more sophisticated sense of humor. They work enthusiastically about purposeful schoolwork and can set goals and concentrate. They become interested in civics and social justice. So all of this is important to take into account when sort of trying to work with a 12-year-old, particularly appealing to these senses of sophisticated humor as well as enthusiasm and interest in social justice, especially when trying to help mediate issues between 12-year-olds or kids in their age group. 13-year-olds socially are developmentally at a stage where mood swings are common. They're navigating responsibilities, which can be hard, right? Developmentally, a lot is happening. Hormonally, a lot is happening, but socially as well. They're taking on more responsibilities. They're learning different things. At 13, they're sort of transitioning or starting to think about transitioning into high school. So a lot of identity creation, identity expression is happening in this age. And there's a lot of mood swings that come with that. They value self-expression. There are fluctuations in their self-esteem. And they want to spend more time with friends and family, which is part of the natural individuation process, which is perfectly developmentally appropriate. Cognitively, they are very sensitive to being perceived by others. The sort of teenage invincibility that we can see sometimes in teenagers begins to emerge, the sort of idea that nothing can harm them, the sort of courage that teenagers have a tendency to have. And they start to become more concerned with moral issues and caring about what is right and what is wrong. So here I would like to ask y'all to take a moment to think about your first crush or your first important friendship. How big of a deal was that to you? How did that feel? How old were you? For most of us, our first very important relationship or crush happens in elementary school, right? Again, it's developmentally appropriate for us to value our relationships with our friends more than with our family as we get older. But even before that starts to happen around 12 or 13, our first crushes are very intense. Our first and early friendships are very real and important to us. I personally remember feeling very intensely about my first best friends. I thought we were, going to be friends forever. And also about my first crush, it was a very big deal to me and I needed it to be taken seriously. I say all of this because I want us to remember that the relationships that young people form might not seem like a big deal to us as adults, especially when we think about our whole lives and how many more relationships have come and gone. But for young people, because of their lack of experience alongside their developmental stages, these first relationships are super important and super valuable to them, right? And taking that seriously is a big part of helping them understand how to navigate them, right? Because if they feel taken seriously by you, they are more likely to share what is going on. So I want us to keep all of that in mind as we go through the next few slides. So now we're going to talk about some scenarios that are common in per age group and some of the appropriate responses for caregivers and educators, depending on what the role is that you play in this young person's life. So our first scenario is Layla. Layla is 5 years old and in kindergarten. She has been struggling to learn the alphabet, but after lots of hard work at home, she was able to remember the whole thing. In class today, Mr. B was teaching about words that start with the letter M, and Layla remembered her recent success, stood up, and proudly proclaimed, "I learned the whole thing." She began to sing the alphabet, and Mr. B said, "Sit down and behave, Layla." Other kids let out an ooh, and Mr. B went back to teaching. But Layla began to cry inconsolably, saying that she wants to go home. So I want us to think about the scenario for a moment and sort of think, what are some ways that Mr. B could have responded? What are some ways that we could respond now, afterwards, if you are a parent or an educator that comes after Mr. B, or putting yourself in Mr. B's shoes, what could we have done differently in this situation that is more in line with Layla's developmental stage? So some different ways that Mr. B could have responded to Layla could be praise, reminders, and redirection, right? So that's great, Layla. Good job. Let's remember to raise our hands when we want to share, though, okay? We're thinking about the letter M. Can you think of words that start with the letter M? Um, so, again, remembering that 5-year-olds really, really look for that reassurance from adults. They need the boundaries, but they also need the reassurance that they are okay in the world, as well as the approval in order to continue to be motivated in their learning. Um, and again, like, crying is somewhat developmentally appropriate at that age because they are still learning how to regulate their own emotions. Assuming this had already happened, though, Mr. B could have said to Layla, or what could Mr. B say to Layla now? Asking the teacher's assistant to take over if possible, or have the class do a task without drawing attention to her from the students, and invite Layla to the couches, the class rug, or a cozy corner, right? Even at 5 years old, young people are very aware of themselves and they want to be liked by others and they don't want to be embarrassed. So sort of giving her that space without drawing too much attention to her can be very helpful. Comforting her and acknowledging that she's feeling big feelings, right? Helping her name those feelings if she's willing to discuss it, validating what she's expressing, praising her for what she's learned, and then reminding her of the classroom rules for next time. No one is perfect. Mr. B, that could have been any teacher, right? Things like this happen, but there's always a way forward as long as we are able to acknowledge the young person's feelings and sort of give them the support that they need in the moment. Okay, so the next scenario, Jax, 6 years old. So Luna and Jax are the best of friends, and they are both in Miss Heather's first grade class. Today in school, Jax told the class about a new book he's reading and proudly exclaimed that he's the first in class to read a chapter book. Luna said Luna says she's finished a chapter book this weekend. After school, Jack goes home upset, saying it's not fair and that he doesn't want to play with Luna anymore. So just like a little bit of what's going on here, remembering that 6-year-olds really love to be first. They're really proud of what they do. They like to move quickly, and they're just learning to get that sense of achievement in their work. And because of their developmental stage, they care a lot about who did what first and sort of having that recognition. So a way to deal with that is to be aware that it is developmentally appropriate for Jax to want to be the first in everything. Help him explore how he's feeling by actively listening, help him find the words to name his emotions, and validate how he's feeling, and remind him that even if he wasn't the first, he still did something super cool, and also remind him of how much he enjoys reading. That can be very helpful because, the feelings of not having been first, of thinking of thinking that he was the first and realizing that he's not, that sort of disappointment can overshadow the passion that a young person or a 6-year-old has for whatever task they engaged in. So celebrating that as well and encouraging him to celebrate that and remember that is very important. So Rumi, 7 years old. Rumi is in the second grade. Today she expressed feeling sad, and when asked about why, she says that a friend at school named Irene didn't want to sit with her at lunch and that she's worried that nobody likes her and that she's never going to make a best friend again. Again, 7 years old, nobody likes me is kind of a common refrain. 7-year-olds are starting to become aware of themselves and their relationships to other people. So how would we respond? It is developmentally appropriate for 7-year-olds to desire closeness within their friendships. It's also appropriate for them to frequently change friendships, right? There's a lot of changes happening, and they're exploring their sense of self. It could be helpful to comfort them and validate how they're feeling, remind them that there are many reasons that Irene might want to sit somewhere else, and that maybe some other day they can sit together. Again, these changes happen frequently. It's also important to remind them that there are other friends they can sit with, that they themselves can make more friends. Remind them that they will indeed have friends again. And it's important as educators, as parents, as caregivers to create and promote a culture of inclusion, whether it be through collaborative projects or just encouraging playing together, sharing, that kind of thing, just across the board. Luna is 8 years old and in the third grade. Luna is a diligent student who usually gets through her schoolwork with ease, but she's been struggling with her most recent math lesson. In today's quiz, she noticed that most of her friends have finished and handed in their work before her, and she begins to become noticeably upset and starts to cry. So How to respond. Remembering that it is developmentally appropriate for 8-year-olds to be working in a hurry, overestimating their own abilities, and to prioritize keeping up with their peers. It can be devastating for an 8-year-old to look around and realize that they're struggling with something that used to come with ease to them before, right? As happens with like any subject that they're learning in school, things become more difficult. 8-year-olds begin to struggle. That's pretty normal, and it's also developmentally appropriate for them to be upset about that, right? In this scenario, it's important to remember that they're still developing coping mechanisms for challenging moments, right? And we can encourage them to sort of use some coping mechanisms by suggesting them, and also by responding with compassion and offering them a break if they need one, deep breathing, some reassurance from adults can go a long way in this moment. Also reminding them that it's okay to not finish with everyone else, that just because they're struggling doesn't mean that they can't, right? Again, these 8-year-olds are still learning what it means to be resilient. These are some of the first challenges in their life, for the most part, or like within this context. So reminding them that they can get through it can go a long way, and that they can always do better next time. Normalizing working through challenges is really important at this age. Okay, Andy, 9 years old, in the fourth grade. So Andy is a popular and imaginative kid. Andy starts a super secret witches club. All of his friends in this club have to do exactly what he says and play whatever he wants, or they can't be in the club, is what he says to his friends. Some of the kids are calling him bossy, but they're afraid to tell him how they feel because they don't want to be left out of the game. How would you respond, is the question. So remembering that it is developmentally appropriate for a 9-year-old to begin to form cliques and to worry about popularity, right? It's also developmentally appropriate for them to be critical of themselves and others. They also might be dealing with anxiety about themselves and their place in the world. They might be looking for a sense of belonging or a sense of control in order to make sure that they can avoid any feelings of loneliness or not belonging, right? It is also developmentally appropriate for them to begin to explore power dynamics. In this scenario, right, we of course don't want Andy to develop in a way that is harmful or not pro-social in some way. But it is helpful to remember that bossiness could just be an exploration of budding leadership skills, which doesn't have to be a bad thing, but it must be balanced with kindness and respect. And this should be communicated to Andy, right? Encouraging the development of self-awareness and empathy in Andy is also very important. For example, teaching them empathy and perspective taking, by asking Andy, how do you think that makes the other person feel? Also remembering that 9-year-olds are very into having a sense of fairness and encouraging them to take turns being the leader, appealing to their sense of right and wrong, which is now developing at that age. Modeling kindness and politeness and empathy is also important, whether you are a caregiver or an educator or any significant adult in their lives. You are the leader a lot of times in the relationship. So modeling that kind of leadership that is kind and empathetic and respectful and fair can be very helpful. And it also is important to, if you're in a classroom setting or working with other children, help each student identify and label what they're feeling and encourage assertive communication and speaking in I statements. I feel, I want. That it's never too early to encourage that kind of communication, and it is always helpful in helping people understand each other. Maria, 10 years old. So the class is discussing a book they read together. Maria is very excited about this book and perpetually dominates the conversation, going on long tangents in her answers. In order to give other students a chance to reply, the teacher stops calling on her, but Maria continues to share her answers and speak over other students. So what can we do? So an appropriate way to respond could be to first of all, keeping in mind that it is developmentally appropriate for 10-year-olds to crave teachers' approval and want to impress them with their knowledge, to be very talkative and passionate about a particular subject or interest, to care about fairness. Um, Keeping all of this in mind can help you shape your response, as well as in the scenario, it is very helpful to appeal to her developing a developmentally appropriate sense of fairness, encouraging her to express herself while keeping in mind that others share their answers, that letting others share their answer is the fair way to do things. Taking Maria aside privately and thanking her for the contributions to the classroom, right? At 10 years old, young people are very much looking for that approval. They very much value the relationship with the significant adults in their life, which can very much work to your benefit. So giving them that acknowledgement is very helpful, and can help them make space for other people as well. Because it could be that she's taking up all of the space out of enthusiasm, as 10-year-olds are often ones to do. They're very talkative. But it also could be that they really want to share with you specifically as the adult in the room what they are learning. So acknowledging that her contribution is very important. And also with that saying, I would also like for other people to contribute. Appealing to her sense of fairness and of sharing can be very helpful. And reminding her of classroom rules and suggesting that she wait until she's called on, or limiting her contributions to 3 times per class or discussion, or after she spoke once, until at least 2 or 3 people have already spoken before speaking again. All of this can be very helpful. Christopher and Alex, 11 years old. So Christopher hit a growth spurt over the summer and is now one of the tallest kids in class. He's become popular with the other kids who enjoy playing sports, which has led to a drift between him and his friend Alex. Alex does not enjoy playing sports and has been feeling left out. In trying to communicate these feelings to Christopher, he accused him of being a bully and said they can't be friends anymore because he's a dumb jock now, in quotes. Christopher responded by calling him a hater and a loser, leading to an argument on the playground. So what can we do to help these young people understand each other better? And how do we respond? It is developmentally appropriate for 11-year-olds to be easily embarrassed and concerned with the opinions of others, right? It makes sense that Christopher would be very interested in maintaining the newfound status that he has acquired with his tallness, to be sensitive about their bodies. Again, remembering that Christopher probably was already feeling sensitive about his body, and now he's grown. People have responded to it positively, and there is probably some fear of feeling out of sync with the popularity again. It's also developmentally appropriate for young people at 11 years old to form cliques, to crave popularity, and to be moody and somewhat self-absorbed. What I mean by self-absorbed is that they might become a little bit more exclusively aware of themselves. Not that they lack the developmental skill, but it's just part of, all of the hormonal and developmental changes that are happening can make it so that they have a hard time remembering to step outside of their own field of vision. So what we can do that is helpful in this scenario is to encourage and model empathy in the classroom, in whatever situation you're in, as well as to encourage collaborative projects between the cliques, and of course, encouraging perspective taking with both Christopher and Alex, asking, what do you think that you would feel in the situation if you were the other person? This is very important. It is also foundational for relationships going forward in the future, and can sort of teach these young people how to become more comfortable voicing their feelings and also listening to the feelings of others in the future. It is also important to develop a culture of respect for individual differences and kindness towards others, right? Valuing that Christopher has a new interest, as well as that perhaps the relationship with Alex is important as well. Okay, Randall, 12 years old. Randall is 12 and in the 7th grade. In class, he told his longtime friend Zara, that he has a crush on her and wants to take her to the middle school dance. Zara explained that she doesn't like boys and doesn't feel the same way, but she wants to continue to be friends. and would go together as friends. Randall told his friends that she's his girlfriend now, and the next day he brought her a box of chocolates and asked to hold her hand. Zara tells her friends that she's uncomfortable but doesn't want to hurt Randall's feelings. Her friends begin to yell at Randall during lunch, calling him creepy. Randall is confused and embarrassed, and Zara is upset that he seems to be mad at her. So this is a pretty common scenario, and it could have taken place at 10, 11 years old, but around 12 is when these sorts of issues of like, they hit a certain kind of peak around 12, these issues between young people where friendships, maybe their other feelings start to develop, and these young people begin to feel like they want to express it and do something about it, right? Whereas at an earlier stage, they might have had a harder time identifying what it means. Around 12, hormonally where they're at, it makes sense that they are sort of starting to identify what kinds of relationships they want out of these feelings. So how to respond? It is developmentally appropriate for a 12-year-old to value peer relationships more than adult relationships. So Zara turning to her friends and saying, here's what happened, here's how I'm feeling, makes more sense than it would for her to tell a teacher or a significant adult. It's also developmentally appropriate for them to be empathic and concerned with the feelings and opinions of others, right? Whereas before we may have seen a little bit more of like that self-direct or self-driven or self-interested pushback or something like that, or issues with fairness being seen as like a group issue. 12-year-olds are starting to empathize with other people and sort of be aware and concerned with how others might be feeling. It also is developmentally appropriate for them to be interested in social justice and protecting each other, right? Seeing as how Zara's friend stepped in this way could be a big part of that as well. In this scenario, it's helpful to encourage Randall to consider how Zara might have felt after he ignored her request to just stay friends, right? This is really important. We can both acknowledge that Randall is feeling hurt in some way, rejected, the outcome did not happen how he wanted it to, he's disappointed, as well as encourage him and explain the importance of respecting Zara's boundaries and respecting her needs as a person. Considering that he might have been confused by her response, it can also be important, but again, underscoring that, you know, in the future going forward, it is important to respect her, sort of helping him develop that sense of empathy and that sort of understanding of what is appropriate when someone has already said no. Validating his feelings, but also emphasizing that we must respect her boundaries and we must respect her as a person, and encouraging him to view things from her perspective, right? Sort of that perspective taking again, saying something like, how do you think you would feel if you were Zara and somebody that you were just friends with but didn't like asked you to the dance, you said no, and then they still brought you chocolates and they still told everybody that you were their partner now. That can be very helpful, again, especially considering that their sense of empathy is growing at this stage. It's also important to check in with Zara, see how she's feeling, and sort of validate her expression of boundaries, as well as to remind Randall that, you know, lying about Zara in this way, how she could feel about that, and to rectify that is also very important. As well as if it's in a classroom, whether it's like in a one-to-one relationship or in some other setting, teaching and encouraging and modeling consent-based practices, right? Consent is an important concept that can be introduced as early as 5. I highly recommend that, as it should be, just so that young people can gain an understanding of, you know, the way that consent works and their rights as people to have boundaries and to have to be able to say yes to things, or to respect a no, or to understand that a lack of an answer is not a yes, it's in fact a no, right? Explaining consent is super, super, super important. They are never too young to talk about consent, especially considering that we practice consent all the time, right? Can I have some of your snack? That is asking for consent. Can I borrow your pencil? That is asking for consent. So sort of explaining these different ways that consent plays into daily life can make it easier for young people to understand how to practice consent when it comes to these relationship milestones. Um, Again, teaching, encouraging, and modeling not only consent based practices, but assertive communication, right? I feel, I say, I don't say, right? Validating that for Zara, it might have been hard for her to express how she felt and what she wanted. So validating that, setting that boundary was the right thing to do, and sort of looking to her for how to move forward and explaining that she doesn't have to do anything that she doesn't want to do. That's very important as well. And just having general conversations around respect, boundaries, and consent in the classroom, as well as modeling that, right? A big part of what we as adults do for young people is modeling the concepts we're trying to teach them. So never underestimate how much modeling a concept like this in the relationship that you yourself have with them can help. Okay, so at this stage, we'll play a little game. True or false? Children at 8 years old typically have strong same-sex relationships. The answer is true. This is true, right? It makes at 8 years old, young people have a tendency to sort of have a lot more same-sex relationships, but it doesn't mean that they're not having relationships with other sexes or gender, of some kind. But their friendships tend to be same sex, same gender. True or false? 8-year olds typically develop new feelings of interest towards someone new. That is true. Um, Again, remembering 8 years old, it's developmentally appropriate for them to start to think of relationships differently, and for them to start to crave certain kinds of closeness. They might not have a full awareness or understanding of what that means, um, but it is pretty typical for 8-year olds to start to develop these kinds of feelings. Um, and yeah, true or false? Uh, Children that are 12 years old are strongly influenced by their peers and no longer by their peers, and parents are no longer the main sources of value. That is true. Around 12 is when young people start to depart from looking to their parents or like the other significant adults in their lives for what is right and what is wrong, or like what their value system is. They start to depart, and this is perfectly healthy and normal, and it's part of the developing independence in a 12-year-old and the developing sense of self that's separate from the family system. Um, Perfectly healthy and just a regular part of development. Okay, so rates of young people, of dating amongst young people. So according to Rachel K. Myers, PhD, MS at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, 20% of teens reported that their first dating relationship began between 10 and 12 years old. So this can be surprising to some people, but it is 100% true. Young people have a tendency to begin to feel these kinds of feelings around 8, and they start to begin to relate to each other more romantically between the ages of 10 and 12 years old. Teen relationships are often short in duration, but a substantial minority, 30 to 40% of young people are in committed relationships. The source for this fact is from Wendy K. Manning, PhD, at the Dibble Institute 2022. And it doesn't matter really how long or short that they are either way impactful to the young person's developing sense of how relationships work, as well as their um, sort of norms for relating to one another. So they are influential, even if they are not long. Okay, so keeping in mind all of this, there are some warning signs for caregivers or even educators of things that might indicate that a young person is either experiencing abuse or causing abuse. So, experiencing abuse, they include noticeable change in mood and character. making excuses or apologizing for their dating partner's behavior often, is afraid of making their partner angry, describes being punished by partner, silence, humiliation, or even like things like looking through their phone, and they have unexplained marks or bruises. So some warning signs that the young person may be causing abuse is violence when angry, talks disrespectfully about their partner, puts them down, controlling behavior with other people, family and friends, blames problems on others or outside circumstances, and is constantly checking in with their partner about their whereabouts or what they are doing. Um, so keeping this in mind can help you not only support someone who might be experiencing this kind of relationship, but also somebody who might be causing it, right? Remembering that young people are all learning how to navigate relationships and the world as a whole. And keeping that in mind can help us be supportive, not only of when they are experiencing abuse, but also when they are perpetuating it. You know, cycles of abuse continue and continue and continue until they are interrupted. And if we are able to spot them at a young age, we are able to deter that from and break that cycle from continuing to happen. So it's very important. It doesn't matter how young somebody is, it's never too early to talk to them about consent, empathy, boundaries, as well as appropriate ways to deal with big feelings. Okay, some ways to support your teenager or younger person. If they are experiencing abuse, stay calm, take deep breaths, believe them, take it seriously. That is very important. Emphasize that it's not their fault. Ask questions. Don't jump to conclusions or judgments. Young people are very sensitive to judgment. Don't force them to share more than they are comfortable with. Ask questions that will help you better understand their situation and what they need, and empower them as decision makers to come up with the next steps together, right? Someone who is experiencing abuse, doesn't matter how young, already is feeling disempowered and already is feeling like they are not, or that like they're missing control, right? We don't want to add to that. We don't want to add to the pain of feeling like you don't have any control over what's happening to you. So instead, we want to empower them to make a decision with you, thinking through safety concerns online, school, transportation, boundaries with the dating partner, and sharing services from local domestic violence organizations, including Day One. So if you are supporting a teen or young person that is causing abuse, stay calm, take deep breaths, ask questions. Try not to jump to conclusions. Try not to judge. Again, we don't want to scare them out of speaking to us or sharing what's going on. Ask questions that will help you better understand the situation and what they need. Access safety concerns for dating partner. Share about the services from local domestic violence organizations, including Day One. And practice healthy responses to their emotions and communication skills, right? We want to validate the emotion, not the behavior, right? We are able to sort of acknowledge that this young person is struggling with how to regulate their own emotions and sort of how to relate to their partner or friends in a healthy way. We want to again make them feel like we are there to support them while also holding them accountable to the reality of what they're doing. And not yelling, not becoming aggressive, which will only spark more aggression, right? Encouraging them that they can change their behavior and remind them that this is a choice, and remind them that their partner is not obligated to stay with them, right? Sort of like going over the parameters of what it means to be in a relationship, and trying to help them understand the root of the issue with them can be very helpful. And that is the end of our workshop. Thank you so much for joining. And I hope to hear any comments or questions that y'all might have. I hope this was helpful to you. Again, my name is Zomali Grion. Our organization is Day One. And we have more information at day1newyork.com, day1ny.org.